This week, the SEC on CBS features two games between programs with no love lost for each other. One feud born long ago, and the other much more recent. In the afternoon slot, it's Georgia clashing with Auburn in the Deep South's oldest rivalry. For Auburn, the game plan might be just close your eyes, chuck it downfield, and hope for the best. After all, that strategy has worked once before.
A miracle in Jordan Hare! A miracle in Jordan Hare!
The main event starts under the lights in what is the definition of a grudge match. Last season, Jimbo Fisher became the first former assistant to beat Nick Saban when Texas A&M upset Alabama. Apparently, what really made Saban upset was when the Aggies won the recruiting race, clinching the #1 recruiting class in 2022. Alabama finished second. Back in May, Nick Saban was at an event speaking about one of the hot-button topics in college sports, name, image, and likeness. Well, Saban decided to push some buttons of his own, delivering a statement that set the sports world on fire.
A&M bought every player on their team.
Accusations that Jimbo not only strongly denied,
we never bought anybody. No rules were broken. Nothing was done wrong.
but then turned around and threw back at Saban.
Go dig into his past. You can find out anything you want to find out, what he does and how he does it. And it's despicable.
Since then, the feud has fizzled. Jimbo wants everyone to think it was just another fight between brothers.
Is that who you fight with the most? Your brothers, the people you're closest to?
Sounds like a truce,
I have no problem with Jimbo. I have no problem with Jimbo at all.
but not many are buying that. This game is also about pride, and if we've learned anything about the GOAT, he doesn't like to lose, on or off the field. So if this one just feels like it might mean a whole heck of a lot more than usual to the victor, well, that's because it will. Primetime drama in Tuscaloosa, and the entire college football world will be watching on CBS.
Things are mighty hot this weekend in the SEC, and SEC on CBS doubleheader. You couldn't ask for two better games. We have Auburn at Georgia. Georgia desperate to get right, to make a statement in this game after nearly falling to Missouri last week, struggling with Kent State the week before that, and then the one we had circled on our calendars this offseason, Texas A&M visiting Tuscaloosa and the Alabama Crimson Tide. You saw Hakeem set it up for you there, the trash talking, if you can even call it that, between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban this offseason.
Let's talk, Amanda.
I think we can we call it that, Rick? You're going to be on the call for Auburn and Georgia. But what do you think about that? Can we call it trash talking between Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher?
Oh, it got even past trash talk. There was some shots fired right there. But listen, there's nothing more competitive than college football. And when you get into the the trenches, so to speak, you're gonna throw some blows. And Jimbo didn't like thinking that he'd done anything wrong. Buying players, wasn't saying he'd done anything wrong. He was just as a matter of fact, talking to a bunch of boosters about wanting to get them to contribute so that he could buy some players too. But Jimbo took it as an affront, and it makes for an interesting night in Tuscaloosa.
An interesting night there. Let's get into the trenches on the game you're going to be calling, Auburn visiting Georgia here. We got to look at Georgia's past two games, because you thought Kent State, okay, maybe that's a little bit of a blip, a wake-up call. Then they go to Missouri, nearly lose that one. How much pressure is on the Bulldogs in this game to show up and make a big statement to the rest of the country?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to get to talk to Kirby here later in the week, but I think this is basically just a case of being a little bit bored. They had such a big game to begin the season with, with Oregon coming to Atlanta and playing in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium there, and they showed beautifully. They proved to the country this was not going to be a rebuild; it was going to be a reload. 49-3 drubbing against a top 20 team. That said everything you needed to say. They might have gotten a little bit over their skis towards the passing game. Just a couple of weeks ago, they were ranked in the top 5 in the country at over 350 yards a game. I think Kirby Smart said after this Missouri win, we found out that we didn't blink when we were kind of up against it. but we also got a little one-dimensional. And in my mind, as an old coach, he was talking to his offensive staff, and he's going to remind them, run the ball, let's take care of the clock. That's how we play to our defense, and our defense is still our strength.
So you don't see any panic here for the Bulldogs or Kirby, more of just a lighting a fire underneath them per se?
I think a recalibration is the way to say it, a way to go back to the winning formula that has been Georgia. He's had his critics because he hasn't been flamboyant offensively like the Ohio States and even the Alabamas in terms of lots of, aerial circus. But I think it's just a recalibration. Hey, you want to lift that trophy at season's end. I know how to do it. Trust me on this.
Talk to us about Stetson Bennett. We love his story there at the beginning of the season. He's being thrown in the Heisman talk there. He's being overlooked. He should be in that conversation. Hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in the past 2 games there. What's your evaluation of him right now?
Well, I love him because he's a walk-on, and I was a walk-on. So walk-ons that make good, we become part of a fraternity. And because you got to go through earning peer respect before you ever get a chance to really get on the field. And he certainly has done that. My only regret for Stetson is, he went on Good Morning America after winning the national championship last year, and he looked like he'd stayed up all night. He should have kept the uniform on. He just should have been in the uniform, the shoulder pads the next morning on that show. Then he would have absolutely been the walk-on of all walk-ons. But hey, he's played brilliantly. He understands the offense. Todd Monken can give him the keys. He can change plays from run to pass. They've got a full complement of receivers. They're missing a little bit of a deep threat right now, but I think that can get solved when they go back to running the ball a little bit more efficiently, and then you'll get some of that play action chance. But he is the straw that stirs the drink. They trust him. The turnovers the last couple of weeks have got to get cleaned up, but Stetson Bennett IV he's a big-time product there at Georgia. They're going to remember his name for a long time.
I forgot about that interview, so thank you for reminding me. I'm going to go watch it later today just as a little entertainment. I don't think he's
blurry-eyed. He should have had his shoulder pads on, Amanda.
That would have been fantastic. Let's talk about Auburn because, look, they have had some offensive struggles. They're averaging 1.24 yards per rush before contact there. I know there's been some reshuffling the past couple of games of the interior offensive line there. Brian Harsin saying he's pleased with the way that's looking. But how does Auburn try to get their offense going against this tough Georgia defense?
The best friend to an offensive line that's overmatched is a running quarterback. And they have made the move now to Robbie Ashford, who gives them just that. Robbie's averaging over 4 yards a carry. He's got the kind of, ability, skill set with his legs to make big plays. And as Eric Keesaw, their offensive coordinator, tries to transition to that kind of offense, it'll make things a lot easier for that offensive line. Obviously, Tank Bigsby and Jarquez Hunter are really good running backs. Bigsby had 1,000 yards last year. To get those guys more holes, you've got to get more guys. You got to make people have to play an extra blocker, and the quarterback becomes an extra blocker. Somebody's always got to be accounting for the quarterback in the front, and hopefully that will open those holes for those very talented running backs.
Rick, I'm curious to ask you as a former coach, there's so much talk around Brian Harsin right now. He's on the hot seat there. I mean, even on CBS Sports, they give him a 4 out of 5 as far as being on the hot seat there, one of the hottest in college football. What sort of pressure is facing him? What's his mentality right now going to Athens there? Do you think he's on the hot seat?
At Auburn, I think you're always on the hot seat. I mean, that's just part of the deal. I think you don't take that job not realizing that they get rid of coaches, lickety split. So you just have to understand that, make sure your business people take care of you, but then you just go coach ball. And I think that's what Brian's doing. Look, Alan Green, who hired him, is gone. They've got an interim athletic director, so the future you can't predict. Like a lot of people, they're going to believe that Brian Harsin's not long for the Auburn job. So if that be the case, it's us against them. And this is going to be their first game on the road. I think that's actually might play to their advantage. As long as the noise doesn't really bother them, it's going to feel like we're the dirty dozen. We've got to go and solve this task we've been given, and it's just us. And we're going to see if we can do it. But I don't think he's thinking about it. I think he's centrally focused on just finding ways to build an offense to go with the defense and see if we can't win some games and shock the world.
This is called the Deep South's oldest rivalry. It is the Deep South's oldest rivalry, 127th meeting between these two teams dating back to 1892. You've been able to call these games. What is the meaning behind this? I mean, how big is this rivalry?
Well, if you like Southern football, and here, if you've been paying any attention this last, couple of decades, you have to love Southern football. Then you get this all over you, as they like to say in the South, right? This is fantastic stuff, steeped in great tradition. You know, you can talk about great coaches through the past, the Vince Dooleys of the world. There have been some great ones who've coached in it. But at the end of the day, it's about finding who's got the bragging rights for the next 365 days. And Georgia right now has the bragging rights. It wasn't so long ago, Jarrett Stidham and Gus Malzahn had them for Auburn when they beat Georgia there in Jordan-Hare. The prayer at Jordan-Hare was against Georgia. So this is steeped in great stories, great tradition, and it'll be much the same in Athens this weekend.
Coach, we appreciate it. Safe travels down there. Enjoy. It's going to be a good one no matter what. We appreciate your time.
The other thing about a game in the South, man, is you can get some real good tailgate food. I promise you.
Yes. Real quickly, what about UCLA? Are they being overlooked 5-0 against the Utes?
Let's hope they're being overlooked. The Bruins looked really good against Washington. Let's hope Utah's looking towards that USC game and we can steal one from them in the Rose Bowl.
Good luck to UCLA and your former team there as well. That's going to be a good one also this weekend. We appreciate it. Have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
See you, Amanda.
All right, so there's your lineup, the SEC on CBS doubleheader. You do not need to leave your television starting at 3:30 Eastern on Saturday. Auburn at Georgia there. The Bulldogs, a huge favorite at home. Is that number a little too big, though, coming off what we saw from the Bulldogs their past couple games? And right after that, Texas A&M at Alabama. We'll see the showdown between Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher.
HQ presented by Capital One. We've got an SEC doubleheader on Saturday night. CBS, the top two teams of the country, both heavy favorites at home. Georgia minus 30 against Auburn. Bama minus 24 against an A&M team that beat them a season ago. Get some picks with Barrett, Sallee, and Chip Patterson. Before we get the picks, want to start by addressing a few of the players here. Barrett, who are you most excited to see in that first game, Georgia and Auburn?
I'm excited to see Stetson Bennett because when you see what he's done the last couple of weeks, he has not gotten the protection that he has needed to at least make those games interesting in the first half. Like, look, I think Stetson Bennett's a great quarterback, but he is not finding receivers outside, but he can run. And when you look at this Auburn defense, it is gassed. It is tired. It is not capable of carrying the load the way that it needs to, considering how bad its offense is. So I want to see Stetson do things like this. Scramble, find his receivers, figure out which of these receivers outside is going to be his go-to guy, because it can't just be Brock Bowers. So I think for me, this is a perfect opportunity for Stetson Bennett to get right. I think he can be extremely electric through the air and on the ground. And I think you're going to see that Georgia team open it up this week, especially after what we've seen the last couple of weeks with the Bulldogs.
My most exciting player is Bennett's best passing option. I'm talking about tight end Brock Bowers. I'm talking about one of the best tight ends in the entire country. And this is a passing game that has kind of taken a step back. We look at the season averages, and Stetson Bennett is one of two players in the SEC averaging more than 300 yards per game. They've got a top 3 passing offense in the conference, but 0 touchdown passes in either of the last 2 games, the Kent State victory and then the upset scare against Missouri. I think that this is going to be a spot where in the red zone, we want to get back to getting these touchdowns, and big number 19 is a huge part of that. I know that Kirby Smart is looking at the health of the wide receivers. He wants to get some wide receivers back before we start to see this Georgia offense really take off. But ultimately, I think that it is right there with number 19 that you are going to have the most excitement going up against this Auburn defense. When plays break down, when Stetson Bennett is scrambling, like Barrett was just talking about, His eyes will be looking for number 19. I think we get a big performance in the Deep South's oldest rivalry from Brock Bowers.
Yeah, people expecting a much better performance from Georgia in this game than the last couple of weeks against Kent State and then Missouri. The line is 30, Barrett. Are you willing to give that many points to Auburn?
No, I'm not. I'm taking Georgia, and I'm going to lay those. Auburn is a broken football team right now. Yeah, sure. Robbie Ashford played well through the air for the first half, but they cannot score in the second half. Brian Harsin on script, good. Brian Harsin off script, absolutely horrible. They're averaging under 3 points in the second half over their last 8 Power 5 games. That is absolutely inexcusable. So with a team like Georgia, we know what they're capable of. The talent level is up here. So, okay, maybe Auburn does hang around for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They don't make adjustments. Georgia does, and it is going to get completely sideways in the second half. Georgia, look, lay the 30, not going to be an issue.
I'm going to go with the total here. I feel so confident that of all the things that I can count on, it's Georgia's defense, which has been overlooked, under-discussed, not thought of, not given the praise it deserves. Because, I mean, the Bulldogs may have lost all those NFL draft picks, and they may be, on a talent player-by-player, position-by-position basis, not historically great. But you know what they are still? One of the best units in the whole daggum country, still only allowing 10.8 points per game. They've only given up 4 touchdowns all season. Auburn ain't scoring touchdowns in this game. And so I look at this and I think that this is too many points on the total. I could see Georgia comfortably cruising to something like a 38-3 kind of win. So I'll go under.
Okay, let's go to the nightcap, and it's a rematch of last year's really exciting matchup between Alabama and A&M. We're not talking about it this week as much as we thought we would be because A&M is just not as good as we thought they would be. They're 24-point underdogs in this game. Before we get to the picks, Barrett, how about a player to watch? And it's a little difficult right now because we don't know who's going to be playing at quarterback.
Yeah, and because of that, I'm taking the guy that was sort of the safety net last week in the second half after that game against Arkansas got close, and that's the running back Jahmyr Gibbs. He broke off 2 70-yard runs in the fourth quarter. He was the closer. We always talk about teams, if they're in a close game, who's going to be the one that shuts the door? It was Jahmyr Gibbs last week. So, yeah, Bryce Young's practicing. We'll see if he can go. Jalen Milroe is a running quarterback. I don't think they're going to make him throw all that much, especially if this game gets sideways, because this is going to be the Jahmyr Gibbs show. I think this guy has been sort of waiting his turn. He's been the focal point of the offense throughout the course of the season, but you really saw him break out against Arkansas. So whether Bryce Young plays, I think we know he's probably not going to be 100%. If he doesn't, you're going to rely on Jahmyr Gibbs even more. So let's take a look at the Georgia Tech transfer. He is going to be the focal point of an offense that I think is going to want to lay a whipping on Texas A&M.
I'm going to stick with Alabama, but I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball. And I think that is a theme throughout our SEC on CBS doubleheader is that, for all that we talk about Stetson Bennett, for all that we talk about Bryce Young and both of these offenses, we have 2 of the country's, not just the SEC's, 2 of the country's best defenses on display in Georgia and Alabama. And so I want to focus in on Will Anderson. Look, he is not having the kind of pace that we had last season when Will Anderson was the best defensive player in the entire country, just rolling up sack after sack, tackle for loss after tackle for loss. But I think that Will Anderson's going to have himself a chance to absolutely feast on this Texas A&M offense that consistently gets behind the chains, consistently finds itself in 3rd and long situations, and that is a green light go for number 31. I think this is going to be a spot where he's not going to be able to make up the gap on trying to get another historic pace in terms of his sack total, but I think that it's going to be very exciting to keep your eyes peeled on number 31 in a lot of very obvious passing situations. That's why Will Anderson's my most exciting player to watch in the game.
All right, well, the early game, the line is 30, and Barrett, you were fine laying that number in the Georgia game. It's 24 in this one. You comfortable with that?
Absolutely. I don't know if you guys remember back in 2014, Kenny Hill came out firing as the replacement for Johnny Manziel in week 1 against South Carolina. By early October, he was getting whipped 59-0 in Tuscaloosa. This game is going to be the biggest blowout since that game. Texas A&M's offense, it just doesn't do anything. It is literally Devin Achane, and that's it. Alabama knows that. They're going to key in on Devin Achane. They're going to absolutely stymie this offense. Texas A&M's not going to get to double digits. And we all can talk about the Jimbo and Saban thing. And look, I get it. I just think from an offensive execution standpoint, they're still sort of trying to figure out their identity. So I think that Nick will keep his foot on the gas for a very long time, not necessarily to rub it in Jimbo's face, although I'm sure he's going to take pleasure in that a little bit, but also try to figure out what his offensive identity is. So yeah, absolutely lay the points.
Line too little. But I'm not talking about the point spread like Barrett is. I'm talking about the total. Our implied score right here with the point spread of the total is 38-14. That doesn't seem right. I think Alabama is definitely going to be able to get over 40 in this game. I think that Texas A&M's defense, while talented, has really only flexed its muscles against poor offenses. Definitely not ones that are the caliber of the Crimson Tide. And I will give some respect to a coaching staff that somehow was able to get Zach Calzada to move the ball on Alabama all throughout last season's win. So 38-14 is the implied here. I think I could see Texas A&M finishing maybe just north of there, around 17. I think that Alabama, without a doubt, is going to be over 40. I will take Barrett's 59-0 because that is also a winner. But I just think this is a few too few points for me to be able to take the under. So I'm going over 51.5.
I hope you guys are wrong, because I hope we get at least one interesting matchup. I guess you can always make it interesting with this, right? But I want to make it interesting with the eyeballs as well. Numbers say it's not going to be interesting. Guys, thank you so much. Barrett, Sallee, Chip Patterson. You can hear him on the Cover 3 podcast. Doubleheader is beginning at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. Georgia, 30-point favorites against Auburn. Barrett said lay the 30. Chip said under 49.5. Chip's going over the 51.5 in the nightcap. And Barrett said he'd lay pretty much any number with Alabama. It's going to be the biggest blowout in many a year.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.